We are continuing our study in the book of Genesis. We just finished up Genesis chapter 33, and now we're going to move into Genesis chapter 34. At the conclusion of Genesis chapter 33, Jacob had moved across the Jordan River and had moved into a territory called Shechem in a city called Shalem, which we discussed. He devoted that territory, he purchased it from, I guess, the king of that region. The whole region was named after him, and he built an altar and he dedicated that area to the Lord, and in completion of a vow that he had made that if God would send him forth to Mesopotamia to bring back Bethel, the house of God, and bring them back safely into the promised land, that he would clearly make a declaration that he would serve the God of his forefathers, Abraham and Isaac, and clearly that is what he did. One of the things that we had looked at was the importance of, before we start Genesis chapter 34, dealing with Dinah and a young prince named Shechem. The scripture says at the end of Genesis 33 says he erected an altar there and he called it El Eloho Israel. Right? And we kind of discussed that. One of the things that I wanted to conclude with is that before we move to Genesis chapter 34, because this is one continuous, we separate this into chapters, but originally this is one long prose, and sometimes it's hard to connect the previous chapter with the current chapter because it's segmented out, but it's not that way. So it helps this to flow together. I'm just going to go back and just kind of tie in the last remaining verses of Genesis 33 as it leads into Genesis 34. But he puts an altar together. We talked about what the altar is. And one of the things that when he dedicated this land that he bought and he dedicated this altar there, right, he dedicated the place that he had purchased with this place in this altar. And it means that dedicated or consecrated both the physical place that he was at, that he purchased, but also he made it a spiritual place to honor God, right? And it meant that it represented a surrender and putting in place covenants and a place of consecration. And that's important, right? Because then the next thing is what happens is that when once Jacob, he visited this location of his fathers and he separated, he consecrated himself and his family. He was doing this because the land that he lived in was full of the Canaanites and they were very perverse and peoples there. So that's why he had to consecrate it there, buy it, purchase it, and proclaim the Lord to be over this territory. Then as we lead into Genesis chapter 34, dealing with Dinah, then we see something happens here. It says, and Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. Now, this is very important. This is in the context of Jacob saying, I purchased this land to separate us, right, from the pagans and heathens of the land of Canaan. And I've built an altar here to both offer up atonements for sin, establish a covenant, and to place the Lord as the territory and God of this region. And then when it leads in after that, it starts out in Genesis 13 and says, and Dinah. So it means that, and now Dinah, knowing what her father had done, what measures he had put in place, how he had consecrated the place, and wanted them to be separate from the people, right? Then Dinah, then it says, and Dinah, given what Jacob just did, and Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. Right. So it says, and Dinah. Now, and some translations say, and now Dinah. Right. And what it's saying is that based on what Joseph had consecrated a place, made it holy, established God to be the God of the nation of Israel and the God of Jacob. And it says, and now Dinah, knowing that, she decided to go out and see the daughters of the land, which is in contrast to what Jacob was putting in place. He said, I want us to be separate from them. And we have our own God whom we serve. And he is the God now of my family that my forefathers worshiped and understood. Now I'm declaring him to be my God and the God of my family, right? With our own separate ways and culture and traditions, right? But Dinah says here, she decided she wanted to go out to see the daughters of the land. Right. So now what this indicates is that This leading phrase indicates her willingness not to remain within the territory that Jacob had consecrated unto God. She wanted to go out and see the daughters of the land. He had separated her. Jacob had separated them apart, so she had to go out to see because he had kind of divided them up and separated from them. And so, despite his efforts, all of his efforts that he had done, and you can kind of get an idea that it wasn't the idea or willingness of Jacob for his family or his daughter, right? This was not Jacob's instruction that they were to go um, and mingle with the Gentiles there, right? With the Canaanites, right? And as if Jacob had given instructions to keep separate. He went through all this effort, but it says, and Dinah, right? She went out to see the daughters of the land, right? Benjamin, you have a question?
Why did they get separated?
What did they get separated for? They were separated because Jacob did not want his family to be um, part of the world, um, messed up. Right. He wanted them to remain in the protection and safety of God, right? And not mix with the dirty, nasty ways of the Canaanites. So he wanted to be separate. But Dinah, she had an interest to see what were the daughters of the land doing, right? And another thing that was unique about this that it doesn't give us much detail if she went alone or by herself. It suggests as if she went by herself, but that would be uncustomary for a teenager. When it says Dina here, she's very young. She's between the ages, some say, of like perhaps 12 to 15 is her age here, right? So it seems very odd that a 12 to 15-year-old girl would travel unescorted in a foreign land which her father had separated the rest of his family from because he did not want them to have dealings with this perverse nations and peoples that was the land of Canaan. But she made herself available, where we're going to find out where she should not have been, right? And this compromise becomes very costly for her. I'm just reading through my notes here, right? If she had not been where she should not have been, we're going to find out she's going to meet this prince who is going to snatch her, right? Basically kidnap her, right? And assault her sexually, right? If she had not been there, the prince would not have seen her. Now, I'm not saying that the what the prince did, of course, was right. He is wrong. His actions and his deeds were wrong. But Dinah put herself in a place because she went out to see the daughters of the land. So there was a reason why Jacob bought that land, separated himself from the people, built temporary tents because he did not want them to remain there. It was just a temporary dwelling place, right? We discussed that it was a temporary dwelling place where they dwelt in tents. It was part of the what would become the festival of Sukkot, where they would dwell in tents, right? And during that time, they were supposed to be dwelling with the Lord. Remember, we talked about the example in the New Testament where Jesus gave us an idea of what's supposed to happen during the Feast of the Tabernacles or the Feast of Sukkot. They were supposed to be eating the bread of life and receiving eternal life, which was during the time of the children of Israel in the wilderness after Moses led them out of Egypt. They were given manna from heaven. So they were supposed to be, Jacob and his family during this time, they were supposed to be learning about God, feeding, learning about Christ, right? It's called the bread of life, meaning that the more that you consume of the word of God, you have to consume it to the point where it brings forth the manifestation of life is what's supposed to be happening. But we're going to see as a result of Dinah's actions, death is going to result from where they're supposed to be spending time in consecration to God, learning about the Lord, fellowshipping with Him, knowing His word and His ways, till it brings forth life, abundant life. They were supposed to be fellowshipping, right, in the presence of the Spirit of God, right, being led by the Spirit of God. Jesus talked about during the feast of Sukkot, we talked about that out of the belly shall flow rivers of living waters, that they were supposed to be at a place where they were supposed to just um, continue to dwell in the presence of the Lord and allow the presence of the Spirit to just overflow, right? That's what's supposed to be happening, right? And they were supposed to also be um, obtaining the glory of the Lord through the knowledge of being in His presence, right? Jesus talked about, we said yesterday in the Feast of the Sukkot, that Jesus said, I'm the light of the world. If any man abide in me, will not walk in darkness, and he shall have the light. So during this time here of consecration at the time of Sukkot, they're supposed to be growing in the wisdom and the knowledge. And when the wisdom, with the wisdom and the knowledge of the Lord comes the glory or the presence of the Lord. It follows automatically along with the power of the Lord. Right. But we see Dinah really had no pleasure in these things. Her pleasure was wanting to know what was going on in the daughters of the land. So she stepped out of government and into abomination, right? What God had brought them out of from Mesopotamia, right? From being in Haran, he brought them out of. She still had a desire, right, to see those things. They were called and separated out by Jacob, right? Because they were supposed to stand out and be a reflection of God's uniqueness, right? And then God's uniqueness was supposed to fill the land. And it was supposed to be a testimony against the Canaanites and all the people that live in the land of Canaan. It was supposed to be a testimony, their lives and their way of living to reflect the ways of God and the nature of God. So they were supposed to be like ambassadors. But we're going to see as a result of this and listening to Jacob, that Jacob is going to say like, oh, you guys have ruined it. You've ruined, you've created trouble for us now, right? Because you've done completely opposite of what their purpose was there for, right? It goes on, it says, and Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land, right? So Dinah didn't know exactly what had been given to her, what she had been given to her. She had no idea that the place that she was in, the protection, the sanctity that Jacob had provided for them. Right? She didn't understand what she had. She didn't know what it meant to have a life without being stained or defiled or experience violence or to be victims of evil and wicked men and wicked ways. She didn't know anything about that, but she was curious. She didn't know much about a self-destructive world, right? And it's almost as if she kind of rejected the way and in the process ended up getting defiled, right? It was as if Jacob was saying, she's saying to Jacob, like, man, the way of God and serving God is hard. You know, I want to know what's going on out there, right? And so she went out to see. Right. There's an example that I looked at when I'm looking at what's happening, what's going to happen here with Dinah. It reminds me of a similar occurrence of David. In 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1 through 5, it gives us these details here, these same details that we're getting us about Dinah here after Jacob, bought the land, separated them out, consecrated with an altar. 2 Samuel chapter 11, verse 1 through 5 talks about David, right? This is the account where David's going to see Bathsheba and he's going to take Bathsheba, and then she's going to end up being with child. And then the prophet Samuel comes and kind of reveals the whole thing. But listen to the detail about what happens before David does this ungodly, unholy thing. It says, and it came to pass after the year was expired, at the time when kings go forth to battle, that David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they destroyed the children of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David tarried still at Jerusalem. Now, what I'm trying to show you here is that they're giving us all these details about David. It was the time of year, at the end of the year, the time of season where kings go out to battle, right? And David was supposed to go out to battle. It says at the time when kings go forth to battle. So David was supposed to go out to battle along with these other kings. You go out and you just, you battle, right? But David didn't go. He wasn't fulfilling the role that he was supposed to be doing as a king. He sent Joab and he sent his servants with him. And he sent all of Israel, right? Everyone but himself, right? And of course, they did go out, and it says here they received victory. They destroyed the children of Ammon and they besieged Rabbah. But it says David tarried still at Jerusalem. And so what this is inferring here is that David wasn't where he was supposed to be, wasn't doing what he was supposed to be doing at the time that he was supposed to be doing that, what he was called to do as a king. He wasn't doing that. All these details are given to us because it's setting up this stage of this understanding that David was not where he was supposed to be. And as a result of that, he made choices and decisions that he would not have put himself in if he was doing what the verses here are telling us that what he was supposed to be doing, that it was a time of year where he was supposed to go out with all the other kings into battle. He sent everybody else and all of Israel, but he stayed in Jerusalem at the time where he was not supposed to be, right? And in doing so, of course, we know what happens. Verse 2, it says, and it came to pass at eventime, David arose from his bed and walked upon the roof of the king's house. And from the roof, he saw a woman washing herself, and the woman was very beautiful to look upon. So he was looking upon her nakedness and saw her while she was bathing, right? And as a result of that, David sent and inquired, verse 3, David sent and inquired after the woman, right? And it says, and one said, is this not Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite? So he sent the servant to inquire about this woman, and the servant comes back and says, hey, this is the wife of a man, right? This is not your wife. Was warning that this is not your wife. This is a man's wife. What you're about to do. And the scriptures goes on. I don't have it written down here. It says he actually went and sent for her and had her brought into the palace, and he laid with her, and she ended up being with child. We know what happened from there. And in David doing so, God, through prophet Samuel, came back and said, your house will be scattered and the sword will never depart from your household, right? And that's what happened when you continue reading through the Chronicles and Kings and First and Second Chronicles and all these accounts. It just shows that violence after violence after violence was in the household of David, and his household was always scattered. And they were always committing other kinds of sexual atrocities as well, his sons and things like that, all because of at the time of the year when kings were supposed to go out to battle, and he sent everyone else there, but he stayed back and he found himself in a place where he should not have been, right? So it's very important, right, when we discuss with our children that what we have provided, God has provided a place of protection for you, ways for you. And it's very important for you to not to step out of those boundaries. I always tell my children, right, if you do what you're supposed to be doing when you're supposed to be doing it, at the time you're supposed to be doing it, you won't have any problems, right? It'll keep you out of trouble. Right? If you don't do that, when you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing, you got to always find yourself out of the protection and the covering and the covenant that God has put in place for you, right? And so a very important thing to kind of understand. When this goes on here in Genesis chapter 33, verse 1, it says, and Dinah, the daughter of Leah, which she bare unto Jacob, went out to see the daughters of the land. When it says went out here, it means it says she's departed forth. Some verses say she departed forth, right? That she departed from the covering, from the spiritual territory that had been put in place by Jacob, that God was providing, protecting for them, right? She went out to see, departed. And it says to see, when you look up this word, she went out to see. The see here means that it's more than just casual observing. Some would say, oh, she just went to see what was going on. But no, the connotation is that after Jacob had already consecrated this place, bought it and separated them from them, right? She went out to see, meaning that it indicates the desire to understand, to engage, to imitate the culture of the land. That's what she went out to see. Wanted to see what the daughters of the land were doing, right? Not just to look around and be like, oh, or hang out, right? It means that she knew the ways of the God of her fathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but she was curious to know what else was going on. Now, if I were to go back and show you earlier in Genesis chapter 33, it was very intentional in saying that Jacob pitched his tent towards Shalem, right? The city of Shalem. That's the same kind of phrase that we saw with Sodom, with Lot and Sodom and Gomorrah. He pitched his tent towards Sodom, right? So we already knew in Genesis chapter 33, that when we saw this, in Genesis chapter 33, it looks like my title here says Genesis 33. I didn't change that. In Genesis chapter 33, it opens with saying that Jacob pitched his tent towards Salem. So we knew that this was an indication that there was some pull or desire that was going on with the family, Jacob's family, that there was this pull, a desire toward the Canaanite ways and the lands and the people, right? Maybe I'll pull that out next time to kind of show you that we knew that this is where this was leading to. And that gives us a better understanding of that. When Dinah went out to sea, it wasn't talking about casually observing, but she wanted to engage. She wanted to be intimate with the culture, right? And so that means she was leaving the protective physical and spiritual borders of her family's camp to socialize with the local Canaanite women, right? And so there were severe consequences of her leaving the spiritual place of spiritual covering, right? And so again, for for the children as well, even for all of us, it's very important for us to understand the danger of compromising God's intended boundaries. We have to know our intended boundaries, right? Jacob purchased a lot of land, a field of land, an area. That was their boundary that had been put in place for them, right? But to step out of those boundaries, intended boundaries, and start to walk into worldly territory, right, and attempt to assimilate or to be entertained by the culture, right, it leads to spiritual vulnerability, and that's what we're going to see here. So there's a spiritual trap of looking at the forbidden or engaging in the worldly things, right? It will initiate a chain reaction of tragedy, trauma, ungodly vengeance we're going to see by Simeon and Levi, right? All because of what Dinah stepped out to do. All right. So actions of what we do are very important. And I have this phrase that, be careful what check you write because somebody's going to have to cash it, right? If if you decide to do something, you're writing the check and it may create trouble for somebody else and somebody else is going to have to cash that. So what you do, where you go, how you act, somebody's responsible for you, right? So that's why parents tell children, don't go over there. Don't be there, Arthur. Don't go over there. Don't be there. Don't hang out with those people. Don't do that. When you do that, you're writing a check that I may have to cash because I'm responsible for your security and for your protection. And I may have to do whatever I may have to do to be able to protect you and keep you safe, right? So, your actions are not just totally in isolation. It's very important to understand, right? It says she goes out to see the daughters of the land. So the daughters here means that the younger women of Canaan. She wanted to see what the other young women were doing, right? All right. And so that's not unusual for young ladies to be like, I want to see what the other women are doing, what the other young girls are doing, because I'm interested, intriguing to see what they do, right? Because sometimes it may seem like, oh, the ways of God are hard and they're unfair and they're very limiting. And I'm not getting to experience everything that's out there in the world. I want to know what's going on. I want to know what the daughters of the world are doing out there. The daughters of Canaan are doing, right? Very dangerous and foolish understanding, right? To have, right? So let me just give you an example here. We know that Dinah's going out to see the daughters of Canaan. I said the seeing was not talking about casually observing to go hang out with make friends. It was because she had an interest in the things of the ways and the culture of Canaan, and she knew that it was different than the ways of that God had established in Jacob. Because when this chapter is over in Genesis chapter 34 and Genesis chapter 35, we're going to find out when we get there that Israel had basically defiled themselves with the land of Canaan. When Jacob pitched his tent towards Shechem in the land of Canaan, although he consecrated it, not everyone that was there served and believed the God of Israel. And look what happens at the end of Genesis chapter 34. After we're going to find out Simeon and Levi were upset about what happened to their sister Dinah. They end up also desiring the ways of Canaan as well, and they are led astray. In Genesis chapter 35, verse 1, 5 through 1, and begins with like this. It says, And God said unto Jacob, Arise, go up to Bethel, and dwell there, and make there an altar unto God that appeared unto thee when thou fleddest from the face of Esau thy brother. Then Jacob said unto his household and to all that were with him, Put away the strange gods. We are now dealing with Jacob saying his family has now taken in the strange gods of Canaan. He separated themselves. This is supposed to be a time of Sukkot where they're supposed to be getting to know the word of God, getting to the face of God, learning about the Lord, right? They're supposed to be growing in the fellowship of the Spirit of God. They're supposed to be growing in that's the river that Jesus was talking about, the river out of your belly shall flow rivers of water. They were supposed to be abiding in the light of God, all these things, but that wasn't what they ended up doing. They ended up being drawn away to also see what was going on in the land of Canaan. They end up having strange gods in their camp. He told them now that God told them that they need to be clean. So they had defiled themselves, right? He said they need to change their garments, right? The way that they were now looking and the way that they were now dressing, they desired the ways of the Canaanite ways. And they had changed their dress and their appearance to look like the heathens and the pagans, right? And so Jacob gave them instruction. He says, let us arise, go up to Bethel, and I will make an altar there, altar unto God, who answereth me in the day of my distress, and was with me in the way that I went. In verse 4, and with this one it says, and they gave unto Jacob all the strange gods which were in their hand. So they were actually, and had brought them close to them, and they were serving them, bowing before them, right? It says all the earrings. So they were taking all the pagan ways, right? Some of the idolatries associated with piercings and earrings and things like that, right? Which were in their ears. It says, and Jacob hid them under the oak which was by Shechem. That's the same place we talked about, the oaks of Mamre and stuff like that, down in the southern parts of Israel. This area was the same area that Abraham talks about as well. There were some oaks there at Shechem when he came through there as well. So we see here that, just kind of jumping forward, right, just giving you the context, that when we're talking about Dinah, what she was facing was this desire to see, was more than just looking around. It was that she was actually wanting to engage and assimilate and be entertained by and welcome in the culture and the ways of the Canaanites. And not only her, it started with Dinah, but we later find out at the end, when we start Genesis chapter 35, that it had infected all of them. And Jacob is like, and then God tells him, go to Bethel, right? We'll talk about that, the spiritual significance of going to Bethel, right? So that's where we're at here. So it goes on. Verse 2, it says, and when Shechem, the son of Hamor, the Hivite, prince of the country, saw her, he took her and lay with her and defiled her. You see, right? It says, she went looking to see. When she went looking to see the ways of Canaan, she came to find out what the ways of Canaan were. Someone else saw her, right? This prince of the country saw her. He saw her. She's looking, he's looking, right? And then he took her, because that is the ways of the Canaanite, right? Whatever you see, the lust of the flesh, you engage it, you act upon it, right? And so she fell prey to that, right? And he lied with her. So he sexually assaulted her and he defiled her, right? So when it says he took her, that means took her by force, right? He forced himself upon her, right? And it says lay with her, and he sexually assaulted her. And when it says defiled her, we'll talk about that a little bit more, but he basically ended up disgracing her and humbling her, right? And all of this because she went out to sea and she saw, and others saw her there. It was like, oh, okay. Now we're going to find out that her desires of being led out of the spiritual covering and protection and the covenant that Jacob had established and God had placed over there, we're going to find out that there was a greater ploy. Satan had a greater ploy in place. What this prince did, it was part of a greater, he was walking in error, right? But Satan was operating through this man to even do something even greater to all of the nation of Israel we're going to talk about when we get there. Check my time. But just as a spoiler alert, at the end of this, the reason the Satan was operating behind this prince, taking her and defiling her, because ultimately what Satan wanted to do was defile all of Israel. A plan was put in place by these individuals that they wanted to defile, take away everything that Jacob had, take away just all his cattle, all the blessing that God gave him. They wanted to take all of that. But the first step of this was that they're going to capture her. This is when they took her, he kidnapped her, right? And then he's going to have negotiations and ransoming her. But their ultimate goal was to take and destroy all of Israel, right? That had been put there and placed there by the will of God and consecrated. So she didn't know that there was a greater ploy in place by Satan, right? She didn't know any of that. And that's what's going to happen. We're going to see this play out as we continue this. Yeah, someone said this is chapter 34, not 33. Yes. I kind of mentioned that. I forgot to change the chapter on this. I'll correct that. Thank you for letting me know that, for letting also others who missed that as well. Verse 33, and it says, his soul clave unto Dinah, the daughters of Jacob, and he loved the damsel and spake kindly unto the damsel. Now, this is kind of crazy. He's telling me he loved her, but he kind of kidnapped her and took her and defiled her. He's calling that love, right? But that is the perversion of the world, though. When it says his soul clave unto her, this is a phrase that means like he was obsessed with her. He had this continual obsession. It's almost like I'm trying to think of like these sexual predators or something like that, but that's not really the word. It's like he just had this a stalker, just some kind of like demonic kind of obsession over this woman, right? Um, and he says he loved her, but the love that he's talking about here is a love in a selfish way, a love with a very strong desire. And in the world, when the world say they love you, what they're saying is that they want to use you, right? And so we who are in the sanctity and the covering of the Father and His Word, we understand brotherly love. We understand godly love. We understand love between a mother and a father, like that, in a marriage bond. But when the world talks about love, it's not the love of a sacrifice and a giving. It's the love of using and taking and abusing, right? But they call that love. He's calling this love. That's the complete upside down nature of the world that we have to understand and that the children have to understand that when the world says I love you, they mean I want to use you and take advantage of you for my selfish ways and selfish gain. And he had this very strong sexual passion and desire, but it's in a selfish way for her. Right. And it says he spake kindly unto the damsel. So it's like, what? It says, and what this means when it says he spake kindly to the damsel, meaning that what he did by taking her, snatching her, kidnapping her, defiling her, when it says he spake kindly to the damsel, it means that he didn't see anything wrong with what he did. Right. In the world, they don't see anything wrong with what they do. The world has a perverted idea of morality. It's completely opposite. What we will say is bad, the world says is good. What we say is good, the world say is bad. They have an upside down morality, right? And so it's very important for us as especially our children who are in the they know about the goodness of God, the good ways, the proper ways of doing things and treating people, right? They come and they interact with the world. They have to understand how the world sees things, how the world interacts, what the world means, what the world's intentions are, right? And it's not going to be the same way. They think they're speaking kindly to you after they've just abused you and used you because they're like, that's what they do. That's the way it is. That's the way it goes. I don't see anything wrong with that, with what I did. We're going to see that he doesn't see anything wrong because he's going to go and talk to Jacob, right? And say, hey, I want to marry her or whatever. And didn't even address the fact that he had kidnapped this girl and has defiled this girl, right? Verse 4 it says, and Shechem spake unto his father, Hamor, saying, get me this damsel to wife, right? Again, Shechem, he is like the king or governor over this whole region. And this region has been named by him, right? And he has a son, and his son is the prince. That's why I'm saying a king, because he's called I'm sorry, Shechem is the prince, right? And I'm sorry, thank you, wife. And the father Hamor is the king, right? So that's why I'm saying Hamor is a king, and because it says Shechem is the prince. And verse 2 it says Shechem, the son of Hamor the Hivite, prince of the country, right? So he is a prince. His father is like the king, right? So the prince tells his king father Hamor, get me this damsel to wife. Again, when we look at the word damsel and you do some research, it's a mid-teenager. On average, we think it's somewhere between age 12 to age 15, right? So it's very young, but during these days, though, I mean, marrying someone this young wasn't very uncommon because the life expectancy wasn't very long during this time as well. Right. So he's like telling his father, the king, get me this damsel to marry. Verse 5 says, and Jacob heard that he had defiled Dinah, his daughter. Now his sons were with his cattle in the field, and Jacob held his peace until they were come. Right. So again, we know that this word defile here means that Shechem polluted her with an unclean act. Right. And this unclean act was very spiritually unclean, what he did to her. Right. Verse 6 says, and Hamor, he's the king, the father of Shechem, the prince, went out unto Jacob to commune with him. So, all right, the father also doesn't seem like this is a problem. He does not rebuke the prince, his son. He doesn't rebuke him for this dastardly deed that he did. He tells his father, hey, go get this woman for me. I've kidnapped her. At this time, Dinah is still in the palace or the company of where Shechem lives, right? His abode, still there, captive, right? Because he took her, right? But the father, the king, does not rebuke his son at all. He says, yes, I will go and we'll go and we'll sit and we will talk and have fellowship with Jacob. Like Jacob was supposed to be like, oh, I understand your ways. Oh, okay, this is fine. Oh, this is okay, right? But Jacob heard these things. He just held his peace. Hamor and the king, they come to speak with Jacob. Verse 7 says, and the sons of Jacob came out of the field when they heard it. They heard that their daughter Dinah had also been defiled. And the men were grieved, and they were very wroth because he had wrought folly in Israel and lying with Jacob's daughter, which thing ought not to be done. So that's not the ways of the nation of Israel. Right, that's not their ways. That's not how they treat women, stuff like that, right? But evidently that was the ways of the land of Canaan. I talked about the ways of the land of Canaan before. They indulge in incest, they indulge in all kinds of sexual perversion, homosexuality, lesbianism. They indulge in all kinds of sexual, any kind of named sexual perversion. It was said that the land of Canaan engaged in all these types of activities. So they were very perverse, right? And we're seeing elements of it right here, right? And so notice here what it says, and because he had wrought folly in Israel. Now we're seeing the first indication of that. Jacob buying this land, um, purchasing this land in Shechem near the city of Shalem, right, or in the city of Shalem, consecrating an altar there, and claiming the land of Canaan for his people because he had purchased it there and they're now in the land of Canaan. He put the altar there. It is now officially Israel. Jacob and his people there are officially the nation of Israel. So that's why I said because he has wrought folly in Israel. So now they are considered Israel at this point. So that's a good transition that we're seeing here that now they're not just the father Jacob, being named Israel, that also now all of the people that are there with Jacob, his servants and his people, they're all called Israel now and in the land of Canaan now. So this is the first basic like installment of the nation of Israel here that we see here, right? And it's to set that distinction that they have a different way of living, a different value system, a different culture than the land that they are in called the land of Canaan. So the things that the Canaanites will do is not permissible in the land of Israel, in the nation of Israel in their way. So that's trying to set this distinction here for us. Verse 8 it says, and Hamor communed with them, saying, the soul of my son Shechem longeth for your daughter. I pray you give him to wife. Right. So Hamor, the king, is speaking to, we assume that this is Jacob, right? Saying, so he's now bargaining, saying, "Hey, please, my son, his soul has such great passion, and desire, it's great longing for your daughter. Please give her in marriage to my son." Right. So when it says the soul of my son, this phrase, the soul of my son, again, it's this very kind of soulish, like it's like their nature, the nature of these individuals. That's why I use this word soul here. It's like their soul is perverted and defiled. It's beyond just like a casual way of doing things. It's like that is their nature. The soul of their nature is perversion and defilement. That's who they are, right? And it's a very strong passion, very powerful emotions and feelings that he's having, but it's not in a romantic way. It's in this kind of dark, obsessive, lustful way. I can't really know how to fully describe it, but people that have like these strong, lustful demons and sex demons and stuff like that, they're just driven by this unholy, ungodly passion to continue to go deeper into sexual darkness and levels of the depths of Satan, right? In their darkness. That's kind of like what's describing what his soul is about, right? He's a soulless individual, but is given to darkness, right? He says, give him to wife. Right? Of course, why would Jacob want to give a man like this to marry his daughter? Like, why would you give your daughter to a man like this, right? Who's already done this thing? So, of course, Jacob's not going to consent to that, right? In verse 9, Hamor, the king, continues talking to Jacob. He says, and make ye marriages with us, and give your daughters unto us, and take our daughters unto you, right? So at this point, Shechem, again, as I said, still has, right? The prince still has possession of Dinah. She's kidnapped, right? We're going to see that she's still there in his palace or castle, whatever. It's going to be revealed later. So so Hamor is negotiating with Jacob from a position of power because Jacob doesn't even have possession of his daughter, right? They actually still have her kidnapped. He's saying, "I've got your daughter. I'm gonna get my way. We have her. There's nothing you can do about it. We're greater than you, bigger than you, stuff like that." He's negotiating for what we call a position of strength and power, right? But this is not the way he's saying, oh, let's make marriages together and give our daughters to one another, right? But this is not the way that you start a relationship between two people. Right. He's saying, oh, we'll be one big happy family. We've taken your daughter and kidnapped her and insulted her. And this is the start of a great big, one big happy family, right? Of joining together. Right. But Hamor is just ignoring the sin of his son, and he's actually covering up sin. Right. But to them, this is the way they do things. That's their nature. It's in their soul to do these things. And I guarantee you, when you look at the land, in the land of Canaan, there's even more things that go on, right? That Jacob knows about. That's why he sanctified that place and made it separate and holy, and consecrated the place that he was at. Put that altar there, and after he was actually offering up sacrifices and atonement for himself and for Israel at that time, his family, right? Verse 10 it says, "And ye shall dwell with us." Right? He's telling them, "I want you to dwell with us." Now, this is what I'm saying is that there was a greater ploy that Dinah, in her desire for Canaanites and their ways and curiosity and want to be intimate with them, she did not understand that Satan was operating with another spirit to draw. That spirit was trying to destroy all of Israel, right? Hamor is presenting that to them. Hey, mix our daughters, dwell with us, be with us, right? We'll share our possessions. You get what we have, right? Trying to intermingle and pervert, and ultimately we're going to find out they want to destroy them all together. We're going to find out. So she was that window of her desire, ungodly desire, was the window in which Satan was going to try to open up and exploit and to try to destroy what God desired and planned to have his nation, a nation of people called the nation of Israel, occupy that land, right? And she didn't understand that, how this is going to really turn, right? Verse 10 it says, "And ye shall dwell with us, and the land shall be before you. Dwell and trade ye therein, and get you possessions therein," right? So he says, we're going to become one big family. We're going to just mingle, and I'm going to pervert you and all that stuff. Of course, we already know in chapter 35, they ended up being perverted, ended up already taking in their idols, ended up intermingling and stuff like that. And so Jacob is going to have to take them to Bethel, right? And get to know God, right? And establish the church, right? So there's the first establishment, it didn't work. They intermingled. This is showing us this pattern of Israel and the church, right? We'll talk about that later. Right. So the situation, so in verse 10, Hamor is saying, this is the situation that you always wanted. You wanted to be in the land, right? As you desired, I'm giving you opportunity to be in the land. But he's saying, I'm giving you the opportunity to be in the land, but you're going to be mingled with us, right? And we're going to use your captive daughter, Dinah, to make this happen, to destroy you. This is Satan's plan working through all of this, right? To actually destroy Jacob and Israel, right? Satan did not like the establishment and the enthronement of God, the enthronement of the Lord, the Son of God, the Word of God in the land of Canaan. Did not want that. Satan didn't want that. So he used the prince Shechem to capture Dinah and defile her as the window to then take even more, right? I'll kind of end it right here, just these verses here. We'll kind of stop short here. It says, "And Shechem said unto her father and unto her brethren," that is Jacob's sons, let me find grace in your eyes, and what ye shall say unto me I will give." Verse 12, "Ask me never so much dowry and gift, and I will give according as ye shall say unto me, but give me the damsel to wife." So Shechem is saying, I will give you whatever dowry you ask, I'll give it to you. It doesn't matter. I'll pay whatever cost it is. I can afford to give any amount of money or request because I have everything. I have all things. He said, but ultimately I'm going to get what I want. Actually, he said, I already have what I want, but I'm going to officially get what I want. He's like, but he says, but give me the damsel to wife. He said, I'm entitled to it. I will get what I want. I will get my way and I will get what I want. He sees nothing wrong with it. He's determined. It's just a matter of just obtaining her, right? He can just buy her, right? I'm going to pause right here because I'm going to need some more time for this. But any comments or questions so far? I'm going to leave this kind of open for next Saturday for Bible study. Any comments or questions as we pause right here?